because this is the first time that I have streamed. Now, I was thinking, so I told Sarah, Sarah sees me randomly get new blazers all the time. I told her, like, for this, I absolutely need a new pink suit, just top to bottom. Thank you, Colby Jack Junkie. Who is that human being? I do not know your name, but I'm sure that you are a friend. So let's see. I asked for a pink suit. I did have a pink tie, but it didn't quite go with the vest or anything else. By the way, all of this real hot. It's very warm, so there could be a little bit less of this. I'm not going to say significantly less, but hey, we've got some drinks to get through. So let's finish the party scene here. The lights grow brighter as the earth lurches away from the sun, and now the orchestra is playing yellow cocktail music, and the opera of voices pitches a key higher. Laughter is easier, minute by minute, spilled with prodigality, tipped out at a cheerful word. The groups change more swiftly, swell with new arrivals, dissolve and form in the same breath. Already there are wanderers, confident girls who weave here and there among the stouter and more stable, become, for a joyous sharp moment, the center of a group, and then excited with triumph glide on through the sea change of faces and voices and color under the constantly changing light. Suddenly, one of these gypsies is trembling opal seizes a cocktail out of the air, dumps it down for courage, and moving her hands like Frisco, dances out alone on the canvas platform. A momentary hush. The orchestra leader varies his rhythm obligingly for her, and there is a burst of chatter as the erroneous news goes around that she is Gilda Gray's understudy from the Follies. The party has begun. And in that vein, let's go ahead and make a drink in a segment that I'm calling Let's Get Lit for Lit. So, for producer Sarah, Brandy Sidecar. This is probably something that Zelda Fitzgerald would have liked. Zelda, one of the inspirations for Daisy, she was a party girl. So there's a great article about her eating breakfast. Her breakfast of choice was to make an omelet or have an omelet ordered at a restaurant and then bring a bottle of Applejack and demand that the chef flambe it tableside. So basically creating an explosion of alcohol just for funsies. So yeah, this is going to be a Zelda Fitzgerald drink. How we doing out there in Chatland? Can everybody hear everything? Can everybody see everything on the bar cam? Oh, hi, Ludlum. I'm glad that you're here because your husband plays a part in one of these later recipes, but we're going to get there in a second. Okay, so for this drink, what we want is to start off with a chilled martini glass. We got that right here. Here's the thing about your alcohol, by the way. If you like a cold drink, chill the glass. Don't chill the liquor. What that does is it makes your liquor a real syrupy, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with our brandy. We're going to get a cocktail shaker here. I got some good ice right here. My friend Aaron Warrington would be very proud. I never have enough ice to please him, and I got this just for today. All right, so I'm going to take a 2-pour brandy. I'm going to pour that in, and then your orange option. I told you you could get whatever you needed, but we got triple sec here. Going to take a 1-ounce pour of that. We're going to take some fresh lemon juice right about here. I want 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. This is freshly squeezed by my butler who pressed a button 1,000 times earlier today. You can shake that puppy up. All right, so here's the thing about the glass on the sidecar. What you want to do is you're going to take one of your leftover lemons here. You're going to run that around the rim of the glass. And if you can see here, I asked you to get some confectioner's sugar. You're going to want to pile that guy on, coat it a little bit all the way around now that it's got some lemon juice. So what you got is that nice sugared rim. So we're going to take all this. I'm going to strain it. delightful. Take a little, we got a lemon twist here. Can add that. I lean more orange as far as my citrus in drinks go, but this one just happens to call for lemon. Let me take a look at the chat while we are mid-drink. Let's see. Okay. Michael, I see that I'm only getting mono-channel audio. Like, I don't know what the deal is there on my feed. So it's got my good quality audio, or my good quality microphone, but it's only coming out the left side. Danny, I see you saying it's a little drummy when I set the bottles down, so I will make a case to not do that. So let's see. Oh, congratulations to the future Ludlum, and I'm sorry, this looks like such a tasty beverage. And Susan, if you don't like brandy, you can make this with whiskey. I am using Paul Masson, I think that's how you say that, and I'm not using it because it's good, I'm using it because it's cheap, and I don't drink brandy too often myself, but my wife does, and I'm going to taste this before I ask you if you want it.
Sure. I'll take it.
Oh, that's delightful. You're going to like that a lot. Okay? Do you want to peek into the camera here? No? Okay, Sarah will not be on the camera, but that drink's going to her. Our next one, this drink is going to be called the Bee's Knees, and you are absolutely obligated to say it like that. The Bee's Knees is a cocktail. This would have been something that F. Scott Fitzgerald and Nick Carraway, could have drunk. Gatsby, not so much, because he wasn't a dude that drank his own liquor. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take our shaker, add a little bit of ice. Now, I do have a gin that I like that I'm going to show you in a second. And I'm going to strongly recommend because it is a Texas gin. It's a little frozen in there. All right, so this is Prairie. That's good stuff right there. Very floral. You can really taste the juniper or whatever the hell is supposed to be in gin. So I'm doing a 2-ounce pour of that. I'm doing more lemon juice. I'm going to do 3/4 of an ounce of that. I see the Veronica Soto's on here. I appreciate you very much being here. I hope you're doing very well. And then this is the honey syrup that I told you to make, okay? So this is 2 ounces of honey and 2 ounces of filtered boiling water, and this actually came from Matt Ludlum's Bees. So he was generous enough to share that with us, and we are generous enough to put it in this tasty, tasty drink. So I'm going to take all that. We're going to cap it so we don't make a mess. We're going to shake it up. All right. We don't really need to filter this one out as much, but it might have some schmuckus, so it's a good pour. Technically, for this, you need a coupe glass. I do not have a coupe glass like a fancy lad, but I will tell you one thing that you can do as a fancy lad. So I've got my lemon peels here, my garnish, but this is a cool little trick that I learned. If you got a nice horseshoe piece of garnish like that, you can split it right down the middle, and then once it's curled, you just tuck it on your glass. Just tuck it on your glass when you serve it, and people say how fancy, and then when they're done, they drop it in. Okay? So there you go. There are 2 Prohibition-era cocktails. So F. Scott Fitzgerald was actually a fan of gin because he thought that people could smell it less on his breath. If you've ever been around a gin drinker, you know that that's not true. So... Yeah, it's tasty. Do you want to taste this one? Mm-hmm. Okay. So we got to pause for a minute for Sarah to do the tasting.
Delightful.
Susan, I agree with you that if Gatsby had one hamartia or one tragic flaw, one hamartia, and he certainly did. Not drinking was one of them. Not swimming was one of them. He was a bootlegger that didn't drink. He was bought a swimming pool he never used. and he never partied at his own parties. So, yeah, there's a lot of tragic qualities to this poor dude. So, now that I have my drink, you can join me back in the study. All right, sorry, we're still on this delay. Oh, I think I got an idea. I'm going to put this over here. I got to shout out Tyler Wallace, who has been doing this once, almost every night, streaming live shows of his music and his performances, just for the sake of it. So I hope you guys are doing well during the quarantine. Hope you haven't lost your minds yet. I hope Gatsby brought you a little bit of solace and distraction while we're doing all this stuff. Do me a favor in the chat box. I can see that coming up about 30 seconds after I say it. If you want to do this with something else, by all means, put it in, we can say in the chat, in the Facebook group. I'm thinking about moving over to Slaughterhouse-5 or Cat's Cradle next, if you guys like what is going on tonight. Looks like Donna just joined the chat. It is so nice to see you, Donna. Okay, so we are going to start. I've got my little cheat sheet back here. I'm going to move it up here. Okay, so we're doing a little segment called Things That Your English Teacher Never Told You, and I'm going to start this. Let me see if I can start my fancy program here with the cover, which you should be seeing now. Now, if you will look, this is an iconic cover, and it comes from a passage in the book. The story about this cover is that Fitzgerald actually saw the cover art while he was writing the novel, and bought it from the artist immediately, said that he was going to use it for his book, and then ended up writing it into the book itself. And I don't have that passage marked, but one thing I want to point out, if you look in the eyes, there's naked ladies. There's naked ladies in the eyes of the cover. This book is in every high school literature classroom in the country. And you know what it is? It's pornography. That is pornography right there. Oh, you guys want to see something cool? By the way, let me get my thing set up here. This is what we can do. Bee's knees. Laura, you drinking the bee's knees? It's a good one. I'll drink to that. And, so the cool thing that I forgot to do, look, up there, can you see that? That's the sidecar recipe, folks. I was the former audio-video production teacher. And let's see if we look over here. Oh yeah, that's the bee's knees. That's the sidecar. That's both of them at the same time. Not the Brian D's, the bee's knees. I think I see some confusion in the chat there. Okay, so we are going to move on to our first section. I'm going to assume that if you either cheated your way through reading this in high school, maybe you saw the Leonardo DiCaprio version, maybe you saw the version that was made for TV in 2000 that had Paul Rudd as the only redeeming part. Paul Rudd, by the way, is, I'm going to say, the best Nick Carraway. I think he is so much better than Tobey Maguire, if only because I don't constantly confuse him with Jake Gyllenhaal. So, yeah, if he could have been in the movie instead of Tobey with Leo, I think Leo's a great Gatsby. I know, naked ladies, Danny, they're right there. Laura, you're drinking a Lone Star instead of a bee's knees. I understand. I told you guys the ingredients, but I understand a lot of people were locked down in quarantine. Okay, so we are going to start by talking about some of the characters, and we are going to start with Daisy. A common complaint we have with Daisy is that people don't like her. And the reason that people don't like her is that Daisy is the literary worst. The worst! So, I really hope you heard that. It was really funny. But I'm going to do it every time we've got the worst. So, the literary worst, part 1, Daisy. Okay, so, constant complaint from high school students is that Daisy is unlikable. Daisy is supposed to be unlikable. She's kind of a terrible human being. And one of the parts that I like here that she talks about is she makes it seem to Nick like she actually doesn't want to be in a relationship, that she understands how terrible her life is. And that happens right after the passage where she tells Nick that she wants to raise her daughter as a beautiful little fool. And I'm going to read that. It'll show you, this is Daisy speaking, it'll show you how I've gotten to feel about things. Well, she was less than an hour old, and Tom was God knows where. I woke up of the ether and was with an utterly abandoned feeling, and asked the nurse right away if it was a boy or a girl. She told me it was a girl, so I turned my head away and wept. All right, I said, I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. You see, I think everything's terrible anyhow, she went on in a convinced way. Everybody thinks so, the most advanced people, and I know. I've been everywhere and seen everything and done everything. Her eyes flashed around her in a defiant way, rather like Tom's, and she laughed with a thrilling scorn. Sophisticated. God, I'm sophisticated. The instant her voice broke off, ceasing to compel my attention, my belief, I felt the basic insincerity of what she had said. It made me uneasy, as though the whole evening had been a trick of some sort to exact a contributory emotion from me. I waited, and sure enough, in a moment she looked at me with an absolute smirk on her lovely face, as if she had asserted her membership in a rather distinguished secret society to which she and Tom belonged. So, Daisy knows what she's supposed to sound like as an apologetic rich person. She is part of the 0.01%, and she knows that she has to put on a show as much as anybody else does to keep her money. She's the literary worst. She goes through all of these trials. She's got a script for when people ask her if she actually enjoys her life. And Nick knows it, but she's got such a hypnotic voice. It said maybe 20 times in the book something about Daisy's voice and how it lulls people in. So let's see. Every time Daisy says the most advanced people, she sounds presidential, right? Let's see. I'm sorry. I hate to get distracted in the chat, but we've got some conversation about Robert Redford, Mia Farrow, and Bruce Dern. I watched some of that one. Don't forget that Sam Waterston was Nick in that movie, and kind of crushed it with those awesome eyebrows. So he was really good. And Mia Farrow, man, Mia Farrow makes some choices. Can we say she makes some choices? But I guess worth checking out. Let's see. We're going to go on to talk about... let's look. Oh, yeah, I want to bring that up. Daisy is constantly threatening to make out with her cousin. That is the only joke that she knows. That is her only social move, is to flirt, to threaten making out with whoever she's around. And more often than not, because Nick is our narrator, that happens to be Nick. It's kind of weird. That's going to be your go-to move. And then, let's see. I don't know if we want to talk about the end of the novel. Nighttime Gardener, happy to see you. Welcome to the chat. We want to talk about the novel. Let's wait to talk about the end, because we'll get there, because it turns out everybody's terrible. But the next thing that I want to talk about is Nick. Because as it turns out, Nick is also the worst. The worst! How am I not going to use that video more than once if I've actually got it in there? So, a couple of things about Nick, right? One of the very first things that Nick tells us about himself, actually on the very first page, the second paragraph, he says this. His father gives him this advice. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had all the advantages that you've had. So the very first thing that Nick says is, the most important lesson my dad ever taught me was not to judge people. Turn the page. He starts judging Tom, and he has the best put down I have ever read of anybody putting down somebody who peaked in college, and that is this one. Her husband, among various physical accomplishments, had been one of the most powerful ends that ever played football at New Haven. A national figure, in a way, one of those men who reached such an acute, limited excellence at 21 that everything afterwards savors of anticlimax. that is one of the best literary burns of someone who peaked in college that I have ever read, that I think has ever been committed to paper. Homer could do no better. Good job, Fitzgerald. Just random side note, by the way, F. Scott Fitzgerald was named after one of his ancestors, F. Scott Key, Francis Key, the man who wrote the Declaration of Independence. So the author of the great American novel is descended from the man who wrote what might be considered a great American song. I'm not going to call it the great American song so long as like a Rolling Stone exists, but you know, that's for another webcast. Okay, so Nick, a couple of things here. Nick very clearly has a fiance back home. He tries to put it off. He's a tremendously unreliable narrator. This gets glossed over in the movie because Tobey Maguire is just the nicest guy in the world. But that's crap. Like, Nick definitely has a girl that he writes to. People have heard they're engaged. He is very cagey about it and then totally bails. He says he's only been drunk twice in his life. He doesn't say that as past tense. He says that all the, up to the point that he's writing the book. Nick's drunk more than 2 times in this book. As a matter of fact, there's one part where he says he's well on his way to getting roaring drunk out of sheer embarrassment. Yeah, that's not a thing a sober person does, right? Getting drunk out of embarrassment, that's not something you do if you've only been drunk twice in your life. Let's see. Checking the chat real quick. Susan, I'm so glad you're enjoying this. Jeffrey McCoy just said that second cousins, it's cool if they're making out because Roll Tide. And yeah, they're actually from Kentucky, but I think it counts. Oh, wait. I said the Declaration of what?
You said the Declaration of Independence.
Oh.
Instead of the Star Spangled
Francis Scott
Banner.
Key wrote the Star Spangled Banner, not the Declaration of Independence. So the bee's knees is good.
I'm doing some background fact checking.
She is. Yes. Sarah is my real-time producer and fact checker. Let's see. One thing about Nick, he doesn't say that Gatsby's car has been ID'd after he's trying to hide it. Gatsby says that they haven't ID'd the car yet. Nick knows that that's not the case, but he says, I was so mad at Gatsby that I chose not to tell him. Now, that would be one thing if he's mad in the moment because he doesn't understand the situation, but then they proceed to talk that entire night about Gatsby's life story, and it still doesn't cross Nick's mind to tell Gatsby that he is definitely in danger as the owner of the yellow car. I am getting notes from my producer. Oh, Sarah's getting a lot of praise. Yeah. Danny, Nick is that guy. He absolutely is. He facilitates an affair. Let's see. At the end of the first chapter, he says that one of his flaws, his most conspicuous flaw, is that he is one of the most honest people that he has ever met. That's what a liar says, okay? That somebody has to tell you they are honest, right? That's what a liar says. As a matter of fact, Jordan Baker, the golfer, and Nick's on-again, off-again fling through the summer, she is the most obvious liar in the whole book. She cheats at golf. She's a terrible driver. She counts on other people not crashing into her to keep from crashing. And at the very end, she says, you know what? Like, the reason that we didn't work out, the reason that you hurt my feelings, is that you're as dishonest as I am, right? So, yeah, Nick is absolutely unreliable. Let's see. Okay, we talked about immediately judging Tom. We talked about, how about facilitating his cousin's affair? That's a good one. Also, not mentioning to her that the first thing that Tom does is introduce her to his mistress, right? So that's kind of a big deal. And then, let's talk about Gatsby. Let's talk about beautiful, gorgeous Gatsby. I think you know where this is going, because Gatsby... The world! If I do this again, I'll have some more clips. I'm sorry, I just peeked a microphone there. I'm not sure what happened. First thing I want to do, let's talk about Old Sport. I love this so much. I'm so glad I get to share this with you guys.
Old Sport.
Old Sport.
Old Sport.
Old Sport.
Old Sport.
Old Sport.
Old Sport. Old Sport. Old Sport.
Absolutely Old Sport.
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 That's a great expression of yours, isn't it?
What is?
Old sport.
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 Old sport. Old sport.
Old sport. Old sport.
Old sport.
Old sport. Old sport.
Old sport.
Old sport. Old sport.
Old sport. Old sport.
Old sport. Old sport.
Old sport. Old sport.
Old sport. Old sport. Old sport.
Don't you call me old sport.
How do you do, old sport? Old sport.
Old sport! Shut up! Shut up!
All right, so that's one that I like to share to all of my classes, and it actually does happen to be classroom appropriate. So this old sport thing, right? This is a man who is new money trying desperately to sound like he is old money. I think we've talked a couple of times. I see in the comments here people trying to sound presidential, right? People saying that they are the most honest people, the best people, lots of people. I hear this from everyone all over saying, you're the most honest, Nick, you're the best, you're the smartest, really should have been a priest with that honesty. Yeah, that's, oh, this is my video, might be talking over. I'm learning this program as I go. All right. So, yeah, with Gatsby, let's talk about conspicuous consumption. This is the great part about Gatsby, because Fitzgerald seems like he's been a fish out of water a couple of times too. Gatsby gets invited to a party. It's a scene that you don't really see. The wife of a friend of Tom's invites him to a party. He says, I'll absolutely go. And Tom and this woman's husband are actually really embarrassed for Gatsby because he doesn't realize he's not actually invited. He doesn't recognize those social cues. The pink jacket's a great one. The pink jacket, the pink suit reminds me a lot of Succession. If you're not watching Succession, why are you watching me talk on YouTube? Stop right now. Go steal your in-laws HBO Go password, hypothetically, and binge all of Succession right now because that show is amazing. Terry Crews is in Great Gatsby. I can see in the chat. So yeah, in Succession, you see these billionaires, and they are always dressed in extremely expensive clothing, and none of it's conspicuous. The only guy that is conspicuous about the way he dresses is the character of Tom, who's this Midwestern nobody, a lot like Gatsby, and who sticks out like a sore thumb. And he's this guy that's trying to make it in the same way that Gatsby is trying to make it. Oh, Clint, let's see, De Niro in the Trump impression. I'll take that. I do think that De Niro needs to play Trump in the biopic eventually. I think that's just pretty obvious casting. Let's see. The biggest part about Gatsby, he has everything physically that he has ever wanted, and he loses it because he needs Daisy to say that she has never loved Tom. She is ready to leave her husband for him, and that is not enough. He has to hear Daisy say that she never actually loved the man that she's been married to, the father of her child, even though he's the worst. I mean, like, he's not the literary worst. He's actually the worst. So here's that passage. Let's see. Gatsby walked over and stood beside her. Daisy, that's all over now, he said earnestly. It doesn't matter anymore. Just tell him the truth, that you never loved him, and it's all wiped out forever. She looked at him blindly. Why, how could I love him? Possibly. You never loved him. She hesitated. Her eyes fell on Jordan and me with a sort of appeal, as though she realized at last what she was doing, and as though she had never all along intended doing anything at all. But it was done now. It was too late. I never loved him, she said, with perceptible reluctance. Not at Capiolani? Demanded Tom suddenly. No. From the ballroom beneath, muffled and suffocating chords were drifting up on hot waves of air. Not that day I carried you from the punch bowl to keep your shoes dry? There was a husky tenderness in his tone. Daisy? Please don't. Her voice was cold, but the rancor was gone from it. She looked at Gatsby. There, Jay, she said. But her hand, as she tried to light a cigarette, was trembling. Suddenly, she threw the cigarette and the burning match on the carpet. Oh, you want too much, she cried to Gatsby. I love you now. Isn't that enough? I can't help what's past. She began to sob helplessly. I did love him once, but I loved you too. Gatsby's eyes opened and closed. You loved me too? he repeated. Even that's a lie, said Tom savagely. She didn't know you were alive. Why, there's things between Daisy and me that you'll never know, things that neither of us can ever forget. The words seemed to bite physically into Gatsby. I want to speak to Daisy alone, he insisted. She's all excited now. Even alone, I can't say I never loved Tom, she admitted in a pitiful voice. It would never be true. Of course it wouldn't, agreed Tom. Now, like we said, Tom is the real worst here, because what he does afterwards is such a douchebag power move. He sends Daisy, his wife, home in the car of Gatsby, the man he knows she is having an affair with. So he is so confident in his ownership of her that he lets her drive home with Gatsby, really for Gatsby's sake, to know that he has won, that there's nothing that Gatsby can do. Of course, Daisy drives, and for some reason, Gatsby lets her drive. He says that Daisy says it'll calm her nerves to drive, and I know every time I'm with someone who is just out of their mind with panic, I want them to drive a car. Yeah, so she kills Myrtle. That all happens. Let's see. Persian, Jay Persian is asking for Gatsby with a hint of walking. Let me think of the best Gatsby speech to do here. I will definitely find one. Actually, we'll read the end as some walking, so we'll be sure that we have that. Welcome, Miss Simons. Let's see. So we got that. We got the naked ladies in the eyes. Let's see. I think that covers a lot of what I wanted to tackle here. So, spent so much time prepping the software, prepping the alcohol, and I hope you guys are enjoying the beverage of your choice. Really, any drink during this time, including a Lone Star, immediately becomes a quarantini. So, drink up. And now, as you're typing any questions or any takes that you might have into the chat box, let's read the last page. And in honor of Jay Persian, as Christopher Walken. Most of the big shore places were closed now, and there were hardly any lights except the shadowy, moving glow of a ferry boat across the sound. And as the moon rose higher, the inessential houses began to melt away until gradually I became aware of the old island here that flowed once for Dutch sailors' eyes, a fresh green breast of the New World. Its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. For a transitory, enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent. Compelled into an aesthetic contemplation, he neither understood nor desired, face to face for the last time in history, with something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. And the last 2 paragraphs of that. As I sat there, brooding on the old, unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity, beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms further, and one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. So, it's going to be our crash course boozy mode about the Great Gatsby. I'm looking at questions now. So, Chris, what a great question. The question here is, so granted that everyone is the literary worst, can you convincingly argue that anyone is redeemable there? Are we meant to blithely hate the rich, or are they also accidentally human? I think that is a great question. Let's go ahead and talk about, let's start with Gatsby. The reason that I think it can be argued that Gatsby is great is because, let's do this. Gatsby is Batman. Okay? Gatsby suffers some sort of trauma as a child that makes him say, I'm going to dedicate my whole being to a singular goal, and he does not let anything stop him. So he uses all of his discipline, all of his willpower, and all of his God-given skill to become the ideal version of himself. The problem is that the ideal version of himself is what a little kid thinks a rich person acts like, right? So he is a caricature of a rich person. So he doesn't realize that he is absolutely cut off from realizing the American dream because he's not allowed into it, right? Either you've been rich forever, or we're going to know that no matter how much money you make, you're not allowed in, right? So that's the Gatsby Batman philosophy. I think what's really interesting here is that it really is just a matter of time that Nick seems to indicate that maybe Gatsby's grandchildren have a shot, because if you'll notice, Nick lies about his past, and we can look that up first couple of pages. He says, my family have been prominent, well-to-do people in this middle western city for 3 generations. The Carraways are something of a clan, and we have a tradition that we're descended from the Dukes of Buccleuch, but the actual founder of my line was my grandfather's brother, who came here in 51, sent a substitute to the Civil War, and started the wholesale hardware business that my father carries on today. So Nick, and that means possibly Daisy's fortunes, are all based on the fact that their grandfather got rich off of extremely duplicitous means. He sent somebody to die in the Civil War for his sake while he stayed at home, started a hardware business, right? So as far as Gatsby, you're welcome. Sometimes words get hard after a bee's knees. And yeah, I think Daisy is probably a victim of her circumstance, that maybe she could be better. Tom's just a douchebag, totally irredeemable. I don't like that the most recent movie played Nick as an alcoholic and telling this frame story through him at kind of a recovery ward. It makes him a little too likable, and you're already playing that a little bit hard. Michael Aguilar asks, my question, why do you believe that there exists a common perception that Gatsby is admirable, worth some amount of emulation? How do you sell your students on the unachievability of the American dream? Man, Michael, that is a stellar question. And Tap Scott, real quick, best movie Batman, Christian Bale for sure. He would be the best Gatsby. So let's see. The question that you have there about like high school students buying a Gatsby isn't worthy of emulation, that's a question that Baz Luhrmann didn't figure out either, right? I feel like if you watch the most recent version of The Great Gatsby, all the actors know. Baz Luhrmann does not. Gatsby is absolutely enviable. And the thing that Baz Luhrmann, I think, gets confused is that he thinks that Gatsby is in love with Daisy. Gatsby is not in love with Daisy. He is in love with the idea of Daisy, right? When they have this conversation, Gatsby says, they're trying to figure out what her voice sounds like. And Gatsby says she sounds like money. He doesn't know anything about her. At one point, she's kind of compared to his new vision of like his perfect ideals. That's the whole point of the green light. He doesn't love Daisy. He loves the idea of Daisy. As a matter of fact, when he actually sees her child, who she pays attention to like twice, Daisy pays less attention to her child than all of the characters in Downton Abbey put together, which is shocking. Because those people, like, they never have children. If you watch Downton Abbey, like, every 8th episode, they say, oh, there's little Collinsworth, and then disappears, right? And so they bring this kid in, and Gatsby's brain just melts right out of his ears because he doesn't understand that somebody could have a life away from him. Yeah, he's not in love with Daisy. And I think we have to convince students and also Baz Luhrmann that Gatsby's not really living life. Gatsby's achieving this ideal of who he thought he wanted to be when he was like 14 years old, right? And when he met Dan Cody a little bit later. Let's see. Susan Swift says in the bigger picture, perhaps it reveals the lie of the American dream. Perhaps we're all irredeemable in our participation of that lie. I think so, absolutely. I think that's why the movies have such a hard time getting it right, because they get Gatsby's coolness. He is absolutely supposed to be cool. He is also supposed to be absolutely cringeworthy. Nothing he does is for the right reasons. Nothing he does is for true virtue. He's just trying to reach a goal that he had when he was 14 years old, and he actually does it, unlike the rest of us who are not able to become firefighter, astronaut, rock stars. So it's that idea of never having actually matured to see that the American dream is actually kind of a childish one, and if you do succeed, you're still only kind of reaching for that green light and swimming in that boat, right? Thank you for that George Carlin quote. I was thinking of that myself. That's why they call it the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe in it. There's some cool interpretations of this recently. One that I saw is that Gatsby is a light-skinned black man. I kept that idea in mind, really trying to think about it this last time I read through. I don't think it holds up. I think Gatsby is described as blushing at least once. I know his father is. So, and that's not to say that a light-skinned black person can't blush, but I think it certainly lends itself to a reading of somebody trying to pass in a different class. I just don't think it can get that racial reading. Invisible Man is obviously the go-to book if you want to read somebody who actually intended that. There is the queer reading of this, that Nick actually has feelings for Gatsby. Yeah. Yep, totally. That is completely and absolutely believable. One addendum to the Nick is terrible is Nick's last words to Gatsby. They finish what is obviously a truthful conversation because some facts come up in it. And then they say goodbye. And it's going to be the last time that Nick sees Gatsby. And remember, he's telling us this is what we already know is an unreliable narrator. He says, "We shook hands and I started away. Just before I reached the hedge, I remembered something and turned around. 'You're a rotten crowd,' I shouted across the lawn. 'You're worth the whole damn bunch put together.' I've always been glad I said that. It was the only compliment I ever gave him, because I disapproved of him from beginning to end." First he nodded politely, then his face broke into the radiant and understanding smile, as if we'd been in ecstatic cahoots on that fact all the time. His gorgeous pink rag of a suit made a bright spot of color against the white steps, and I thought of the night when I first came to his ancestral home 3 months before. The lawn and drive had been crowded with the faces of those who guessed at his corruption, and who had stood on those steps concealing his incorruptible dream as he waved them goodbye. I thanked him for his hospitality. We were always thanking him for that, I and the others. "Goodbye," I called. "I enjoyed breakfast, Gatsby." There's no reason to believe that Nick actually said that. They're a rotten crowd, you're worth the whole damn bunch put together. If you were telling this story afterwards and you are as unreliable as Nick is, of course that would be the last thing that you would want people to think that you said to him. That's absolutely something that is how you'd make it up. And Chris says, such a self-congratulatory prick Nick is. Yeah, Nick just about tears his shoulder out, patting himself on the back several times in this novel. I would completely agree with that. With all that being said, I want people to reread this book if you ever have a chance with that in mind, and still not doubt the integrity of it. I think we'd read it the first time in high school. We don't get it. We'd read it as a love story. I think the same thing happens to Romeo and Juliet. Also directed by Baz Luhrmann, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, and completely missing the point. Wow. But yeah, it is absolutely still worth reading if for looking at those themes that maybe don't get pointed out in a high school classroom. The last quote that I want to leave us with, if I can find it, is this great quote about people who drink Gatsby's liquor and don't come to his funeral. This one. Nick is calling everybody to come to Gatsby's funeral. Nobody will. He finally does get a hold of Wolfsham, and Wolfsham says he can't show up. The only person there are Nick and old Mr. Gats, Jay's dad. He says, after that, I felt a certain shame for Gatsby. One gentleman to whom I telephoned implied that he had got what he deserved. However, that was my fault, for he was one of those who used to sneer most bitterly at Gatsby on the courage of Gatsby's liquor, and I should have known better than call him. I love that quote. Sneering at a man on the courage of his liquor. Ludlam, hey, I have to say I gave a hard time to prom themes. I think we were totally justified in having a Gatsby-themed prom so long as all of those people... Well, no, that would have been rude. Let's see. Gatsby-themed prom. Next time, let's just call it, the Roaring 20s prom. Here we are in the Roaring 20s in the middle of a pandemic and a stock market crash. So, things come around, I guess. So we got that going for us. But if you guys liked this little session, please let me know. If you want to do it for a different book, please let me know. I'm still kind of getting the hang of this. I want to kind of see what people thought. But it was a pleasure to see you all. Hopefully this gave you a little bit of a distraction from all the crazy stuff going on in the world. Let me know what you want the next book to be and what this should look like in the future. One thing I was thinking about is, should there be some sort of talkback option beyond a chat? Should this be like a Google Hangout where people can ask questions or jump in, or does this format work? And until then, I will be on the back porch of my estate staring at a green light, which means something, I guess. All right. Good night, old sports.